Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment. I'm Kristin Sokoloff here with my co-host Ron Ward. Today, we are diving into something that is reshaping every industry, the new workforce. From Gen Z entering the scene to hybrid work becoming the norm, leaders everywhere are asking, how do we adapt?
Yes, everyone, we are excited to delve into this. So think about it. The workforce of 2025 looks completely different than it did, say, 10 years ago. We've got 5 generations working side by side, remote first mindsets, and employees who are demanding purpose, not just paychecks.
Man, if you really think about that, the 5 generations working side by side, that alone is wild to wrap your mind around.
Kristin, just to jump in quickly, I did speak to someone that worked at Walmart, and I saw an older person come over to the cash register. This was I'd say a girl, maybe 21 years old, and I didn't ask her, but she looked very young. Yeah. And the person said, "I'm going to take my break," and she said, "Okay." And I said, "Are you that person's manager?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "How many people do you manage?" She said, "I've got about 15." I said, "What's the age?" She said, "Well, I have someone like 72.
Wow.
So I thought, who would have ever dreamed a 21-year-old would be supervising a 72-year-old?
Right? Yeah, that's got to feel weird for the 72-year-old. But I managed people that were older than me all the time, and a lot of them just didn't have an interest in leadership is what I found. So they were okay with it.
Some would argue they're great employees. So
absolutely, they are. Okay, so let's talk about how expectations are shifting. So starting with expectations, the new workforce isn't afraid to ask for what they want. You touched on it, flexible hours, mental health days. Yes, that is really what they're asking for. And meaningful work. I would say, when you say, Ron, meaningful work, it's like a passion project. They want something they're passionate about. They feel like it's positively impacting at least society in some respect.
Yeah, and I've read several articles where Gen Z looked at the Millennials and how they worked themselves into the ground. And, everybody was all about making money, all the posts, everything. And they've realigned. And I've said this before, certainly Gen Z has its issues, but they do bring their values to work, and they're not just sellouts. If they believe something, they'll die on the hill. And I admire that about them.
Yeah. You know what? I do too. I absolutely understand where they're coming from. It's less for them about climbing the corporate ladder and more about aligning values. And as a millennial, I'm actually the Oregon Trail generation, which is a micro generation, but I am a millennial. And I totally understand. I was all about climbing the corporate ladder, right? And my values, that was like secondary. So I see where they're coming from, and I don't hate them for it.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to see how major corporations have tried to adjust. As you know, the pendulum always swings too far. So there were companies who were trying to do too much for their employees. Then they started realizing, the bottom line, they started losing money. Yeah. So I do think over the next year or two, we're going to see an alignment where we finally get sales and values and all these things to align. In the old days, I've said this before, command and control. This is what you do it. But this generation questions, why am I even here? Am I valued? Do I have a purpose? And they will leave. We've talked about that before, but in that pendulum swinging, Gen Z is starting to stay. You're going to love this, Kristin. They're starting to stay on the job longer than they were just 5 years ago. So today it's about shared agreements, which means it's the way you phrase things. If I said, Kristin, be here at 5 p.m., or if I said, hey, can we agree that you're going to be here at 5 p.m., or what do you think about 5 p.m.? And then when you say yes, then boom, we have a shared agreement. And Gen Z, that speaks to them. They feel they have the buy-in, they have some purpose. So it's a give and take, but companies are having to balance that out to make sure their employees feel valued, but yet you're still, fulfilling the mission.
Yeah, it's like they want to be at the table while the decisions are being made.
That's right.
And that is a huge adjustment for folks that are coming from different generations, even millennials like me. Let's talk about the technology and adaptability aspects because that plays a huge role. So, I would say that this generation would be considered digital natives. They grew up swiping before they could write, a lot of them. I mean, I'm serious when I say that. They grew up on iPads and their parents' iPhones. I'm not just Apple, but whatever devices. AI, automation, digital collaboration tools, they aren't nice to haves. Those are baseline expectations for this generation.
Yeah, and the leaders have to be tech fluent, not tech fearful.
Yeah.
And you have to be adaptable, and you have to be able to pivot and not, create struggles or show that you're going through a struggle. And I think the cutting edge leaders have finally embraced technology. It's the wave of the future. And that's why, Kristen, even as you know, with my media company, we jumped on AI early. I purchased a suite. And don't get me wrong, I do think there's dangers, but I'm not going to sit around and fret over these dangers when I could be using it. And it's really made my life a lot better. And I
Yeah.
just talked to Kristen. We're getting media contracts. So I
Yeah.
invested in a suite. So you got to embrace it.
Exactly. And I have to, I think the main thing is when it comes to the AI, just be discerning, right? Like you can boss around your AI like the way you could never speak to an employee. So,
It's true.
very harsh. You don't have to worry about your tone. It's not going to get offended. It's not going to report you to HR. So you can really drive it, but you have to look at it and be discerning about what it's given you. Actually, I want to talk about something. You just did a post on this, Ron, and this is like grit versus passion. And what did your post say exactly?
Well, it showed how we went from IQ, everyone, it's how smart you are.
Mm-hmm.
Then it went to EQ, the emotional intelligence or emotional quotient.
Yeah.
How well can you talk to people? Then, of course, with COVID, everything shifted. They believed the best leadership trait was adaptability.
Mm.
And then it went to grit, like just whoever works the hardest. But now there's a lot of studies showing, now I'm talking about sales and influence really, that passion, if you believe in something, you can really convert it into sales or convert it into influence. And when we certify a new coach, Kristen, that is the most difficult part, is getting people. They say, I've always, given things away. I've always given free advice. And I tell them, you're
Yeah.
selling intellectual property. But once they learn the system, the blueprint, and they get excited about it, then they get
Yeah.
passionate about it. And if you believe in it, you can sell it. And
Right.
I went through the same progression when I first started coaching. It was like, gosh, this is really hard for me to do. But then I started getting
Mm-hmm.
testimonials. I started believing in it. So
Yeah.
if you are in a place, this is a side note, if you're in a job that you don't believe in, I think that will slowly erode you emotionally.
Yeah.
And
No matter how much money you're making.
that's exactly right. So you
Yeah.
may want to begin making that 2-year plan. I always say it takes 2 years to make a really strong transfer, but you might want to think about that.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And thanks for talking to that. I like that because, speaking of struggle, we used to talk about grit as the key to success, but now passion and belief in what you're selling, to your point, or what you're doing seems to be the bigger driver. And the new workforce wants to work with conviction.
That's exactly right. Yes. I think there's some wonderful things that are coming back with Gen Z, but working
Mm-hmm.
with conviction, we've already said that. But I want us to talk a little bit about how they're bringing a new balance.
Yeah.
I've said this before. My daughter, she literally knows when she's worked too hard, and then she's going to do some self-care, and it's actually inspiring me because, Kristen, I'm so work-oriented that, I could say I need to go get a massage, or I need a chiropractor, or I need, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I'll go a week, 2 weeks, and it never enters my mind. I almost have to schedule self-care and,
Yeah.
outside of a haircut. And I'm trying to work on that.
Yeah. What is the generation before millennials? Is it Gen X?
Gen X, and that
And
was
then
a
what was
brief,
before that?
well, boomers, but they
Okay.
They keep changing that around, by the way. They keep shuffling the deck. But yes.
Well, I'm trying to nail down what my mom would be, but I'm thinking a boomer at this point.
She would probably, be in a boomer category.
And the reason I bring that up, my mom literally had this is literally how, even I would say, even us as millennials, in the beginning, I'm 1981, right? So like early on in the millennial. Anyways, my mom basically, she canceled 3 or 4 dermatology appointments. She was an executive for a large clothing company, and she had seen something on her skin. She was like, I should get that checked out. But then every time it was time to go, she would have a big meeting or something at work, and she didn't feel like, she didn't value herself enough to tell her work, I actually have a doctor's appointment that I need to go to. That skin issue progressed, and she had melanoma. Yeah. And had to have a pretty in-depth surgery on her face. So that really changed her. That health scare changed her to where she puts herself first. She's since retired, but that's just one story of people that, before this Gen Z generation, right? Like Generation Z, we would just be, I've canceled doctor's appointments for work also. Like, you just keep going. And so when we started seeing the change, we would call them like wimps or, all sorts of stuff like, oh my gosh, you're soft because you need a personal day. But, there's something to it, Ron.
There is. And I want to talk to C-suite people and what we used to call the ivory tower. This is a fact. For example, I wrote pre-sentence reports for the federal courts. When you have federal court, I don't care if you have the flu, you're going to make every effort because you don't want to ask a judge and a U.S. attorney and defense attorney to continue a hearing. So the demands they were so solid, they were concrete that it was hard to maneuver. And there's I've had people tell me, if I take a day off, my work doubles. So it's easier for me to balance. So here's what I would say is that companies have to factor that in, and they're starting to do that. They're starting to have well-being days, mental health days, some people call them. So I do see companies being more flexible, but in all honesty, Kristin, I don't know how your job was, but it was really difficult for me to miss work. Now, when I became academy director, I would have meetings I needed to attend, but it was at least I had 2 deputies. Someone could back me up in a lot of the stuff. But I do think that Gen Z is bringing a change. Maybe it's from the bottom up, so that there is some flexibility. And I asked a question one time when I was doing a training. I said, do you go on vacation or do you go on vacation? And that is a question I think we all need to ask ourselves. Do you take breaks or do you take breaks? Here's the problem, and you probably did this too. When I would take a day off, I had all these errands I had to run. It was almost as stressful as the work day because I was behind.
Yes.
So we got to find that balance.
Yeah, we really do. We really do. So, and I was in the same boat, Ron. There was only one of me for the majority of the time when I managed an actual like physical branch. You go into a bank, there's one manager, one assistant manager, and you have like 6 other people, right? Like a lot of times, if you're gone, there's nobody there to fill your shoes.
Yeah.
So it was very, very, very difficult to get a day off.
We need to bring the word cross-training back and have people ready to move in. So, Kristin, let's talk a little bit. Now, we could go into terms. I studied some of these, and we might do a podcast on it. But Gen Z has rewritten the English language. I mean, oh my God. So I think it's worth talking about, multi-generational teams, but also speaking the language. And so if you're going to have multi-generational teams, leaders have almost got to be translators. And the first thing you got to go into as a leader is to understand that values mean something to these people. They want to know the why. And people used to just want to know, what do you need me to do? I'll do it. But not anymore. They want to know the why. So leaders need to at least have a basic understanding. Like, I was talking to someone the other day and they said that tracks, which, that means that aligns. That's cool. But cap is now a lie. So if they say that's cap, that's a lie. I'm not telling you have to, dress like and act like. But I always tell Kristen I'm transgenerational. I like to keep up with all the generations, but
Yeah.
anyway, a true leader can serve as a translator. When you do have
Yeah.
that 72-year-old and you've got the 21-year-old, that you can help them communicate. And
Yes.
a shameless plug, but there is a story about that in my book.
Yes. No, I think that's awesome. What's funny is my father-in-law, I serve as IT for him. So my father-in-law will call me anytime his streaming devices aren't working, and he's calling me from Florida. And here's what I appreciate. I used to help when online banking first came out. I helped so many people sign up for online banking, including senior citizens, because the majority of people that were my age could figure it out on their own. I have helped thousands, and I'm not exaggerating, of senior citizens sign up for online banking. So now that my father-in-law calls me regularly when he gets logged out of one of his streaming services, Netflix, Prime, Paramount, I mean, I'm walking him through it. And it's really cool because I'm able to draw on all of these experiences and your patience. And let me just tell you guys, if you're working with somebody on something technical and they're trying to figure it out on their end and you're walking them through it, don't make small talk. Don't feel the need to fill the silence while they're trying to figure it out, because that just prolongs everything. And so I was just sitting there in silence while he was clicking on things. And I was like, I feel bad not like having a conversation, but that would have made it very difficult for him as a senior to focus on what we were doing. So I think it's, these are these multi-generational teams that happened in the workforce as well. I had people working for me that were much older, and you have to walk them through it, and you have to really hone the patience.
No, that's
But
great.
it's in our everyday lives. Even like I said, even your in-laws or your own parents are going to need your help, and you have to be able to understand where they're coming from.
And so, Kristen, we're gonna give you some free information, folks, that hopefully will help. But I've had people say, okay, I hired someone, Gen Z age group, and they do want flexibility. They want to be able to take days off. They want to work from home, or at least part-time from home. So
Yeah.
how do I balance all that? I'm running a small business. The first thing is you got to be upfront. You got to have the boundaries and accountability upfront. You can't surprise people with that.
Right.
So even when you do your job announcement, it needs to say, either part-time work from home or, full remote work. You got to put all of that in there, or no remote work.
Right.
And they may even try to negotiate. But I think what people do is they don't make the affirmative statements in the beginning. But also another question, I had this come in, I'm gonna be doing a rant on it, Kristen. I've got several new ones. This one is about, and it was, even the Gen Z, some have improved, it's that people are staying on their cell phones when they're supposed to be serving customers.
Yeah.
So this needs to be part of the orientation or the onboarding. Is we limit cell phone. You cannot be checking your cell phone during work hours. On your break, you can check it.
Right.
And then you have to enforce it. If you don't enforce it, it's just going to go off the rails, or you're going to look inequitable, that we've talked about.
Right.
You were going to say something. Go ahead.
No, I'm thinking about the same thing. I'm agreeing with you. You have to, it's an addiction. How many, even you and I, I'm sure we've talked about this before. It's this urge to go check your phone. And that's even if there hasn't been a notification. And so it is very difficult. If you allow them to have it by their workstation, they are going to go check it.
Yeah. And Kristen, another thing is, this is so crazy that we still use this technique. You've got didactic and then you got Socratic methods. And this is one of the things we teach in coaching. Some people only do didactic, which means you give people everything they need to know. There's no room for questions. You do A, B, C, D. But the Socratic method came from Socrates. And, he was a philosopher, so he wanted people to think deeper. So one of the best ways to onboard Gen Z is you got to ask the right questions. Be didactic, show them what they need to do, but then start asking, why do you think we do that? Do you think there's a better way to do this? As you use that Socratic method, they will get excited. They will have buy-in. But unfortunately, a lot of companies, they're still going A, B, C, D. This is what you do. And,
Right.
and that's it. But you need to ask questions, get to know. And Kristin and I
Yeah.
have said this before. When we say Gen Z, we don't mean everyone. There's always exceptions. I
Of
guarantee
course.
you, we should do this. Last episode, we talked about the difference between the Northwest and the South. I would love to know the difference in Gen Z in the Northwest and the South, because I guarantee there are differences. And
Oh,
the last
yeah.
thing before you weigh in, my youngest daughter's 25, and I do think she's a little bit of an old soul naturally,
Yeah.
but she's very conscientious of not wasting money. She's thinking about, she saves her money. She makes
Wow.
good decisions, and she's on her phone less than this guy. So
Wow. Yeah.
that's why I said I was very negative toward Gen Z. I really was, because I had some bad
Yeah.
experiences in
Same.
restaurants. But now I'm starting to gain a little more. They are marrying at a higher percentage, getting married, meaning
Good.
traditional values.
Yes.
So there's a lot of good things, and they are the least. They really don't care about race. That means nothing to Gen Z. And as a matter of fact, I think if we would leave them alone, let them lead the way,
Yeah.
things would balance out. But that's a really cool aspect of Gen Z, is race means nothing to them. Just
Right.
let's
So stop.
rock and roll. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what else is really interesting? Alcohol sales are down. So like the wine industry, and just beer, all of that, it's all down because Gen Z, they are not drinking as much.
Well, they're
And
health
I have a lot
conscious.
of yes, they're health conscious. I don't drink very often, but I sure know my millennial friends. Woo! That was a big part of growing up.
Yeah, no kidding. I consider myself pretty healthy because, I do the health shake. I'm looking at my disgusting cup right here, right now. But
You
my
do more than
daughter,
just a health shake. But yeah, that's one,
yeah,
one aspect of
my
it.
daughter, though, is healthier than me. She puts concoctions in the refrigerator. I'm not sure what they are. I think some of them are alive, but
Yeah.
But yes, there's a lot of value, but you have to leverage that value that Gen Z brings. You
Right.
also have to have a measure of accountability with boundaries and be that translator. And if you can communicate,
Yeah.
the sky's the limit when you're hiring these
It
people.
is. And I want to just say, and this is going out to mainly leaders, but if you're in like a supervisory role, leader, in any form, try to really, when you're asked, because this was, a lot of people's knee jerk is to say no. I don't know if you've noticed that, Ron, especially in leadership. So when asked for an exception or flexibility, what I liked to do was, okay, even though you're like mentally your knee jerk is to say no, why don't you say, well, what does this hurt? So if someone, like I had someone that would come to me and just, hey, you know what? Is there any way I could get tomorrow off? And even though you're kind of thinking like you didn't schedule this in advance, right? I'm like, you know what? Let me go look at the schedule. Let's see how that would check out. And I literally would tell my team, I'm giving so-and-so a day off. Nobody call in sick tomorrow, right? Because then it's like, that's like that one. You can't control that.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I would find ways to say yes. Now, I wouldn't do it to where it's going to hurt my business. That you have to have, you have to have boundaries there.
And-
But if you can, do.
Mhm. And Kristin, that's a great place to put in. You're giving autonomy here, but it also is a great way to work in a boundary or accountability. For example, I'm going to grant this, but as you know, this month we're busy, so let's try to make sure that's the only day you take this month.
Yeah,
That way you've
unscheduled
bargained,
day off.
you've
Right.
bargained, you've got a shared agreement, and you've accomplished a lot. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. No, I think that's good because you'll notice a lot of people's knee jerk is no, and then they kind of walk back. Potentially, some don't walk back at all.
Yep.
Okay, so the new workforce. In closing, here, let's bring it to a close. isn't something to fear. I think that's really important. General anxiety is the fear of the unknown. And I think that that is a huge piece of it. So understanding what makes them tick is going to lessen that fear. It's an opportunity, a chance to rethink leadership, if you will, reimagine culture, and then you can redefine success.
Yeah, that's true. If you're willing to grow with your people, you're not only going to attract top talent, but you're going to retain top talent. And that's one of the big keys. This is all part of the dirty side of leadership. It's messy, but you can navigate it and you can come through it. The term, when I wrote the book, The Dirty Side of Leadership, it was never meant to mean that it is a negative or that you can't prevail. It means you got to be smart and you got to flow with the times and have a good understanding of what's going on around you. And believe me, I will say this to the credit of managers and leaders, or at least give you my sympathy. I've never seen change at this rate in my entire life. Over the past 5 years, especially with AI and all these things, it is unbelievable how fast change is happening. But you can handle it. You can rise to the challenge.
Buckle up. You got this.
That's exactly
all right, you
right.
guys, thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us, listen to our podcasts, rate us, and share us out. Don't forget we have a Facebook group that you can join for more discussions. And until next time, lead with purpose and adapt with courage.
Be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.